I stood in the billionaire's study, my hands trembling as I stared at the contract. 6 months. A fake marriage. $200,000. My brother's future secured. All I had to do was become his wife and pretend to love a man 40 years older than me. What I didn't expect was falling for his son instead. This is my story of how a desperate contract turned into the most dangerous love affair of my life. Before we jump into this story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and drop a like. Comment below and tell me where you're watching from. I want to see all of you joining this story. The fluorescent lights of Havenshore General Hospital buzzed overhead like angry wasps as Lena Brooks pulled off her latex gloves and tossed them into the biohazard bin. Her feet ached with that deep, throbbing pain that meant she'd been standing for too many hours without a break. Her lower back screamed in protest with every movement, and the exhaustion settling into her bones felt permanent, like it had become part of her DNA over the past 3 years of working double shifts. 14-hour shifts were becoming her norm, and tonight had been particularly brutal. 3 code blues in the cardiac wing, 2 family breakdowns where she'd held sobbing relatives while doctors delivered devastating news, and 1 elderly patient who kept insisting she was his daughter from the future and that he needed to warn her about the robot uprising. On any other night, that last one might have made her laugh. Tonight, she just nodded wearily and adjusted his IV. She checked her phone as she walked toward the staff locker room, her shoulders hunched with fatigue. 7 missed calls from Evan. Her stomach dropped like a stone. Her younger brother never called that many times unless something was seriously wrong. The last time he'd called this frantically was when their mother had her stroke 2 years ago, right before she passed away in this very hospital. Lena's hands shook as she opened her voicemail, leaning against the cold institutional wall for support. "Lena, I got another email." Evan's voice came through, and she could hear the panic threading through his words like barbed wire. "They're threatening to drop me from the program if we don't pay by Friday. That's 3 days. 3 days, Lena. I don't know what to do. I can't lose this spot. I can't. This program is everything. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I know you're working so hard. I know you're exhausted. But I don't know who else to call." Lena closed her eyes and slid down the wall until she was sitting on the floor, not caring that her scrubs were touching the questionably clean hospital tiles. $19,000. That's what they needed to keep Evan in the engineering program at Havenshore University. $19,000 she didn't have, couldn't borrow, and had no conceivable way of earning in 72 hours. Her credit cards were maxed out from the last emergency. Her savings account was a cruel joke, containing exactly $247. She'd already picked up every extra shift the hospital would give her, without literally killing her from exhaustion. She'd sold everything of value she owned, including her mother's jewelry and her father's watch collection. She had nothing left to sell, no one left to borrow from, no options left to explore. She sat there on the floor, 29 years old and completely defeated, when someone cleared their throat above her. "Miss Brooks." Lena looked up to find Maurice Landon standing in the hallway, his silver hair perfectly styled despite the late hour, his navy suit probably worth more than her car. She'd helped him during his cardiology appointment earlier that day, noting his elevated blood pressure and the worry lines etched deep around his eyes. He'd been a difficult patient, resistant to taking the medications Dr. Chen had prescribed, arguing about side effects and insisting he felt fine despite clear evidence to the contrary. "Mr. Landon," she said, scrambling to her feet and trying to look professional despite feeling like she'd been hit by a truck, and then backed over for good measure. "Is everything okay? Do you need me to call your doctor? Are you experiencing chest pain or shortness of breath?" "No, he said, waving his hand dismissively. His movements were refined, controlled, the gestures of a man who'd spent his entire life commanding rooms full of powerful people. I wanted to thank you properly. You were very kind today. Very patient when I was being difficult about the medications. You didn't treat me like a stubborn old man, even though I was being exactly that. Lena managed to smile despite her exhaustion. That's my job, sir. I'm glad I could help. You really should take those medications, though. High blood pressure is nothing to play around with. Maurice studied her for a long moment, his sharp blue eyes seeming to see right through her carefully maintained professional facade. Those eyes had built an empire, had stared down competitors and politicians, and everyone who'd ever underestimated him. Now they were focused entirely on her, and Lena felt uncomfortably exposed. You look troubled, Miss Brooks, he said finally. Forgive an old man's nosiness, but is everything all right? You seem like you're carrying the weight of the world on those shoulders. Something about his genuine concern broke through her carefully maintained walls. Maybe it was the exhaustion. Maybe it was the panic about Evan. Maybe it was the fact that she'd been holding everything together alone for so long that even a stranger's kindness felt overwhelming. Or maybe it was just that Maurice Landon had kind eyes that reminded her of her late father, who died when she was 16, leaving her to raise Evan alone with their increasingly ill mother. Just life, she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Sometimes it feels like drowning, you know? Like no matter how hard you swim, the water just keeps rising and you're going to go under eventually. Maurice nodded slowly, and something shifted in his expression. Recognition, maybe. Or understanding. I do know, he said quietly. More than you might think. The drowning feeling doesn't care how much money you have or what your title is. It's remarkably democratic that way. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Two people at completely different stations in life sharing a moment of mutual understanding about the universal experience of feeling overwhelmed. Finally, Maurice pulled out a business card from his wallet, the thick, expensive kind with embossed lettering. This might seem strange, Miss Brooks, but I'd like to speak with you about a professional opportunity. Would you be willing to visit my home tomorrow evening? I promise it's nothing inappropriate. My assistant and lawyer will be present, and you're welcome to bring someone with you if it makes you more comfortable. I'm not some creep trying to lure a young woman to my house with vague promises. Lena stared at the embossed card. Landon Dynamics. Everyone in Havenshore knew that name. Maurice Landon was practically royalty in this city, a self-made billionaire who'd built his industrial empire from nothing, who employed thousands of people, whose philanthropy had funded half the public works projects in the region. What could he possibly want with a nurse aide who couldn't even afford to keep her brother in school? What kind of opportunity? She asked carefully, suspicion warring with desperate hope. Maurice's expression became unreadable, controlled again. One that might solve both of our problems, he said. I'll explain everything tomorrow. 7 o'clock? I'll send a car if you need transportation. Against her better judgment, against every instinct that said this was too strange to be legitimate, Lena found herself nodding. Because what did she have to lose? In 3 days, Evan would lose his spot in the program. In 3 days, everything she'd sacrificed for would be gone. If there was even a chance that Maurice Landon could help, she had to take it. Okay, she said. I'll be there. Landon Ridge Estate sat on 40 acres of manicured perfection overlooking Havenshore Harbor, where the old money families had built their compounds generations ago. As Lena's ancient Honda Civic sputtered up the circular driveway the next evening, making concerning sounds that suggested it might die at any moment, she felt completely and utterly out of place. The mansion looked like something from a historical drama, all white columns and tall windows glowing with warm light against the evening sky. The grounds were immaculate, with gardens that probably required a full-time staff to maintain. A butler actually answered the door before she could even knock, like he'd been watching for her arrival. He was older, distinguished, with the kind of posture that suggested decades of formal service. "Miss Brooks," he said in a crisp British accent that seemed almost too stereotypical to be real. "Mr. Landon is expecting you in his study. Please follow me." The interior was even more intimidating than the exterior. Marble floors that reflected the light from crystal chandeliers, probably worth more than her entire apartment building. Paintings on the walls that looked like they belonged in museums, not private homes. Furniture that was clearly antique and probably cost more than most people's cars. Lena's worn sneakers squeaked against the polished stone, and she resisted the urge to apologize for existing in such a space, for bringing her poverty and problems into this temple of wealth. Maurice stood when she entered his study, a room lined floor to ceiling with leather-bound books and dominated by a massive mahogany desk. He gestured to a leather chair across from him, and Lena noticed two other people in the room. A severe-looking woman with a laptop and a man in an expensive suit holding a briefcase. "Thank you for coming, Lena. May I call you Lena?" Maurice asked. "Of course, Mr. Landon." "Please, call me Maurice." He poured 2 glasses of water from a crystal pitcher, and Lena noticed his hands shaking slightly. He was nervous, she realized. Actually nervous. "These are my assistant, Patricia, and my lawyer, Howard Chen. I asked them to be here because what I'm about to propose needs to be documented properly and witnessed. I'm going to be very direct with you because I don't have time for games, and I suspect you don't either. What I'm about to propose will sound insane, possibly illegal, though I assure you it's not. But I'm asking you to hear me out completely before you respond. Can you do that?" Lena's heart hammered in her chest. "Okay." Maurice pulled out a folder thick with papers and placed it on the desk between them. "I need you to marry me." The words hung in the air like smoke. Lena blinked, certain she'd misheard. Her brain simply couldn't process what he'd just said. "I'm sorry, what?" "A contract marriage," Maurice continued, his voice steady despite the absolute absurdity of what he was saying. 6 months, purely professional. No romantic or physical obligations whatsoever. You would live here at the estate, attend social events as my wife when necessary, and help me with a specific family situation. In return, I'll pay you $200,000 upon completion of the contract. Plus, I'll cover your brother's entire university education, housing, and living expenses for the remainder of his program. Lena's mouth went dry. She looked at the assistant and lawyer who both maintained professionally neutral expressions, as if billionaires proposing contract marriages to nurse aides was a perfectly normal Tuesday evening activity. "Mr. Landon, I don't understand," she managed finally. "Why would you possibly need to do this? You could marry anyone, actual socialites who know how to navigate your world. Why a random nurse aide you met once in a hospital?" Maurice's composed facade cracked slightly, and Lena saw real pain flash across his features. "My son is destroying himself, and I'm watching it happen in real time, powerless to stop it. Damian is 34 years old, brilliant beyond measure, and completely lost. He drinks too much, crashes expensive cars, makes headlines for all the wrong reasons. He's been arrested twice for drunk driving, involved in 3 separate incidents that required expensive lawyers and settlements. The board of directors at Landon Dynamics is threatening to remove him as heir to the company. Everything I've built over my entire life, everything I've sacrificed for, will crumble if I can't help him get his life together." Maurice stood and walked to the window, looking out over his perfectly manicured grounds. His mother, my wife Claire, died 10 years ago from cancer. Damian was 24, and he never recovered. We never recovered. This house became a mausoleum. Our relationship became this cold, formal thing where we barely spoke, and I watched him spiral, unable to reach him, unable to help. Every therapist I've sent him to, he quits after 2 sessions. Every intervention I've tried, he laughs off. I'm losing him, Miss Brooks, and I don't know what else to do. And you think marrying me will fix that? Lena asked, her voice sharper than she intended. I'm nobody, Mr. Landon. I'm a nurse aide who can barely pay her bills. I know nothing about your world. How would that possibly help your son? Maurice turned back to face her, and his expression was intense, desperate. Because you're stable. You're kind, responsible, grounded in reality. You work hard, you care for others, you don't chase money or fame. You have integrity, Miss Brooks. I saw it in how you treated me yesterday, in how you spoke to other patients, in how you carried yourself despite being clearly exhausted. Damian has been surrounded by sharks his entire life, people who want something from him, who see him as a meal ticket or a status symbol, or a way to get to my money. I'm hoping that having someone like you in the house, someone with absolutely no agenda beyond fulfilling a contract, might provide the structure and example he desperately needs. Lena stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly. This is crazy. I can't just marry a stranger for money. What would people think? What would my brother think? What about when people find out it's fake? Won't that create a massive scandal that makes everything worse? Evan would think his sister secured his entire future, Maurice said quietly, ruthlessly. No debt, no stress. He could focus entirely on his studies. Graduate with honors. Get the kind of job that would let him support himself without struggling the way you've struggled. As for what people think, does it really matter? You'd have enough money after 6 months to start over anywhere you wanted. You could go back to school yourself, become a registered nurse or physician assistant like I know you've always wanted but couldn't afford. You could travel, live somewhere new, do whatever you've been putting off because you're too busy surviving. And the scandal? Lena pressed. Howard, the lawyer, spoke for the first time. The contract includes strict confidentiality clauses. You would present as a genuine couple who met through the hospital. A whirlwind romance between a widower and the kind woman who cared for him. After 6 months, if things don't improve with Damian, you'll separate quietly, citing irreconcilable differences. You'll receive a generous settlement as part of the divorce. It's all very clean legally. Lena wanted to say no. Every rational part of her brain screamed that this was insane, potentially dangerous, definitely unethical. She didn't know these people. She didn't know what she'd be walking into. This could be some elaborate scheme or trap or something even worse. But the exhausted, desperate part of her brain, the part that was so tired of fighting and struggling and drowning, whispered seductively about salvation, about Evan graduating debt-free, about not having to work double shifts until she collapsed, about having options for the first time in her adult life. I need to think about it, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Maurice nodded. You have until Friday at noon. That's when your brother needs the money, correct? That's when he gets dropped from the program if payment doesn't come through. Lena's eyes widened. How did you know that? Maurice had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. I'm a thorough man, Lena. I don't make major decisions without research. I looked into your situation after our interaction yesterday. I know about your brother's engineering program. I know about your mother's medical bills that bankrupted you. I know about your father's death when you were 16. I know you've been fighting alone for a very long time. But let me be crystal clear. I'm not threatening you or manipulating you, I'm simply stating facts. Friday, your brother loses his spot in the program, and likely his chance at the life he deserves. Friday, I'm officially losing my son to his demons because the board is forcing my hand. We can help each other, or we can both continue drowning separately. The choice is entirely yours. Lena didn't sleep that night. She sat in her tiny apartment, surrounded by past due bills and student loan statements, and tried to think through the implications of what Maurice was offering. She called her best friend Rachel, a fellow nurse, and explained the situation. "That's insane," Rachel said immediately, like, completely bonkers. "You can't marry some random billionaire because he asks you to." "It's not random. It's a contract, a business arrangement." "A business arrangement where you become someone's wife? Lena, that's not normal. What if he's dangerous? What if this whole thing is some elaborate scheme?" His lawyer was there, his assistant. Everything was documented. "And what happens to your actual life? Your job? Your apartment? You just disappear into billionaire land for 6 months?" Lena hadn't thought about that. "I guess I'd have to quit the hospital, give up my apartment." "Exactly. You'd be completely dependent on him. No income, no home to go back to if things go wrong. That's incredibly vulnerable." But Rachel didn't understand. Rachel had parents who could help her if things got difficult. Rachel didn't have a younger brother depending entirely on her. Rachel had options. Lena made her decision on Thursday night, sitting in Evan's dorm room, watching him stress over his potential expulsion. He'd lost weight from stress. His eyes had dark circles that matched her own. He was brilliant, hard-working, and completely devastated at the thought of losing his dream. "I'm going to fix this," she told him, and he looked at her with such hope that it broke her heart. "How? Lena, I know you're already working yourself to death. Please don't take on more hours. Please. I can take a year off, work, save money." "No," Lena said firmly. "You're not losing this opportunity. I've got it handled." She called Maurice that night. "I'll do it. I'll marry you. Kiko." Lena signed the contract on Friday morning at Maurice's lawyer's office, her hands shaking so badly that Maurice had to steady the papers. The contract was thorough, covering every conceivable scenario: living arrangements, public appearances, confidentiality, termination clauses, payment schedules, even protocols for how they'd interact with media. The wedding happened on Saturday afternoon in the estate's rose garden, a simple civil ceremony with only Maurice's lawyer, assistant, and the officiant as witnesses. Lena wore a cream-colored dress she'd bought on sale 3 years ago for a cousin's wedding, and Morris wore a gray suit that probably cost more than her car. "I promise I'll make this as easy as possible for you," Maurice said, as they signed the marriage certificate, now legally binding them together for the next 6 months. "You'll have your own wing of the house, complete privacy, your own bedroom, bathroom, sitting room. We'll establish a routine that works for both of us. Public displays of affection will be minimal, and only when absolutely necessary for appearances." Lena nodded numbly, wondering what dimension she'd stumbled into where she was now. Mrs. Lena Landon, wife of a billionaire industrialist, stepmother to a man only 5 years older than her whom she'd never even met. "When does Damian get back?" she asked, suddenly terrified of this additional complication she'd barely considered. Maurice checked his expensive watch. "His flight from Ibiza lands in 3 hours. I thought it best to let him return home before I explain the situation. Give us time to establish you here first." "You haven't told him?" Lena's voice pitched higher. "You married someone without telling your son? Your adult son who lives with you?" "Damian and I aren't exactly communicating well these days," Maurice said wearily. "He's been in Ibiza for 2 weeks, partying. Before that, it was Monaco. Before that, the Bahamas. He comes home long enough to fight with me about his life choices, then disappears again. But yes, I should have told him. I didn't know how." Lena seriously doubted that Damian would understand eventually, as Maurice seemed to think. She was proven catastrophically correct when Damian Landon walked into the dining room at 9 o'clock that Saturday night, tanned and clearly hungover, and froze mid-step when he saw a strange woman sitting at his family's dining table. "Who the hell are you?" he demanded, his voice rough and hostile and tinged with an accent that suggested expensive international boarding schools. Before Lena could respond, Maurice entered from the kitchen carrying a wine bottle. "Damian. Good. You're home early. I'd like you to meet Lena, your stepmother." The silence that followed was deafening, like all the air had been sucked out of the room. Damian stared at his father, then at Lena, then back at his father. His handsome face, all sharp angles and dark eyes that probably made most women forget their own names, twisted with disbelief and rapidly building rage. "My what?" "I married Lena on Saturday afternoon," Maurice said, trying to sound calm though Lena could see tension radiating through his shoulders. "She'll be living here from now on." Damian's laugh was harsh and bitter, echoing off the high ceilings. "This is a joke, right? Some kind of elaborate prank? Because there's no way you actually married some random woman without telling me, without even mentioning you were seeing anyone." "She's not random," Maurice said, his voice taking on that controlled tone that suggested he was working hard to remain patient. "She's a healthcare professional who impressed me greatly during an appointment. We connected. Things moved quickly, and I decided it was time to move forward with my life. It's been 10 years since your mother died, Damian. 10 years." "How old is she?" Damian asked, his voice dangerously quiet as he stared at Lena like she was something he'd found on the bottom of his shoe. "She looks younger than me. She looks like she could be my girlfriend, not my stepmother." "I'm 29, Lena said, finding her voice despite wanting to disappear into the floor. "And I'm sitting right here. You can talk to me directly." Damian's eyes locked onto hers, and Lena felt the full force of his scrutiny. He was devastatingly handsome in that dangerous way that usually meant trouble. The kind of man who'd never been told no in his life, who'd always gotten exactly what he wanted through some combination of looks, charm, and money. Dark hair that looked artfully disheveled, a jawline that could cut glass, and eyes that burned with intelligence and anger. He was wearing designer clothes rumpled from travel, and even hungover and furious. He was magnetic. But right now, those dark eyes were filled with contempt and suspicion. "Congratulations, Goldilocks," he said sarcastically, his voice dripping with disdain. "You hit the jackpot. Marry the old billionaire, wait for him to die, inherit everything. Classic gold digger playbook. How much is he paying you? Or did you go straight for the marriage certificate without negotiating terms first?" "Damian," Maurice warned, his voice sharp. "No, seriously. What's your angle? Trophy wife? Nurse who decided playing the long game for a fat inheritance was better than working double shifts? Did you target him at the hospital? Scan the patient list for wealthy widowers?" Lena stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the marble floor. She'd dealt with difficult patients, aggressive family members, and countless jerks in her life. She wasn't about to let some spoiled rich boy intimidate her, no matter how handsome he was or how much money his family had. "Your father and I have an arrangement that's none of your business," she said evenly, keeping her voice steady despite her heart hammering. "I'm not here to take anything from you or compete with you or whatever scenario you've built in your head. I'm just here to do my job and try to bring some stability to this house. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have an early shift at the hospital tomorrow because, unlike some people, I actually work for a living." She walked out with her head high, but her hands were shaking again by the time she reached the sanctuary of her new room in the East Wing. She locked the door and leaned against it, breathing hard. What had she gotten herself into? She called Evan, who answered on the first ring. "The money came through," he said breathlessly, and she could hear the relief flooding through his voice. "Lena, what did you do? How did you get $19,000? Plus, they said the rest of my tuition is covered too. All of it. For the rest of the program. What's happening?" "I got a new job," she said, which wasn't technically a lie. A very good one with excellent benefits. Don't worry about money anymore, okay? Just focus on your studies and becoming the brilliant engineer I know you can be. You're the best sister in the entire universe, Evan said, and she could hear him getting choked up. I'm going to pay you back. I swear when I graduate and get a job, I'm paying back every single penny. I know you will, Lena said softly, tears streaming down her face. I love you, Ev. Make me proud. After they hung up, Lena lay in the massive bed in her new room, a room larger than her entire former apartment, and wondered what she'd just traded her life for. The first 3 weeks were absolute hell. Damian seemed determined to make Lena's life as miserable as possible, like he'd taken it as a personal mission to drive her away from the estate and out of his father's life. He called her Nurse Charity every chance he got, saying it with such disdain that it sounded like the worst insult imaginable. The contract bride, when he was feeling particularly vicious. Daddy's midlife crisis when he wanted to be crude. He made snide comments about her clothes, her background, her presumed motivations. He asked loudly at dinner if she was sleeping with his father yet, or if she was holding out for the deathbed for maximum payout. He brought different women home almost every night, parading them past the dining room where Lena and Maurice tried to have civil dinners. The women were always model beautiful, always dressed in designer clothes, always giggling at Damian's jokes and hanging on his arm. He'd make pointed introductions. This is my stepmother. She's practically my age. And watch for Lena's reaction. But Lena refused to rise to the bait. She'd grown up dealing with bullies, had worked in hospitals where patients and family members said terrible things when they were scared or angry. She knew how to maintain her composure. She went to her shifts at the hospital. She'd insisted on continuing to work despite Maurice's protests, needing something of her own life to hold on to. She came home, had pleasant conversations with Maurice about his day and his health. She ignored Damian's provocations completely, treating him with cool politeness when interaction was unavoidable. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, she started making changes to the house. She organized the staff schedule, noting that the housekeeper was working far too many hours without adequate breaks. She updated Maurice's medication routine, setting up a system that made it easier for him to remember his pills. She started cooking dinner some nights. Simple comfort food that filled the cold, museum-like kitchen with delicious smells and warmth. She convinced Maurice to take morning walks around the garden, noticing his improved mood and blood pressure after even brief exercise. She befriended the housekeeper, Maria, who confessed that the house had felt dead since Claire died, like a beautiful tomb rather than a home. It's nice to hear laughter again, Maria said one afternoon while Lena helped her fold laundry, something a billionaire's wife probably shouldn't do, but Lena couldn't break the habit of being useful. To smell cooking, to see the garden being used instead of just maintained. Mr. Landon seems happier too. And slowly, grudgingly, Damian started noticing. He noticed that Lena made coffee every morning and always made enough for everyone, setting out his favorite mug without being asked. He noticed that she treated the staff with respect and genuine kindness, learning their names and asking about their families. He noticed that she never asked Maurice for anything beyond what they'd agreed to. No shopping sprees, no jewelry, no expensive trips. He noticed that she worked full shifts at the hospital and still came home to make dinner, even when she was clearly exhausted. That she sat with Maurice in the evening, talking about everything from politics to old movies, engaging his father in a way Damian hadn't seen in years. One evening, 4 weeks into the arrangement, Damian walked into the kitchen and found Lena at the stove, stirring a large pot of soup. She was humming softly to herself, and the kitchen smelled incredible. "You don't have to cook," he said abruptly, surprising himself by speaking to her without hostility for the first time. "We have staff for that. Maria can cook." "I like cooking," Lena said without turning around, not making a big deal out of his civil tone. It relaxes me after long shifts. Besides, Maria has been working here for 20 years. She deserves evenings off. Want some? It's butternut squash with sage. I don't like squash. Have you ever tried butternut squash soup? No. Then how do you know you don't like it? Damian found himself reaching for a bowl before he'd consciously decided to. The soup was incredible. Rich and creamy with just the right amount of seasoning. Nothing like the bland, health-conscious food the staff usually prepared to manage Maurice's blood pressure. It's good, he admitted grudgingly, sitting at the kitchen island. Lena smiled at him for the first time since they'd met, and Damian was struck by how it transformed her face. She was pretty. He'd noticed that immediately. Soft features, kind eyes, the kind of natural beauty that didn't need enhancement. But when she smiled genuinely, she was luminous. See? She said. Sometimes trying new things isn't so bad. Sometimes the things we think we'll hate end up surprising us. Something shifted in that moment. Not dramatically, not obviously. Just a small crack in the wall Damian had built around himself, a tiny opening that let in a bit of light. He started coming home earlier after that. He began joining them for dinner more often, contributing to conversations instead of sulking silently or eating in his room. He stopped bringing random women to the house, stopped making headlines for drunken escapades. Maurice noticed and praised Lena privately. Whatever you're doing, it's working. He's changing. But Lena shook her head. I'm not doing anything special. I'm just being myself, living my life. Whatever changes Damian makes, those are his choices, not my influence. I'm not some miracle worker, Maurice. I'm just a person trying to fulfill a contract. But Maurice knew better. His son was changing, and Lena was absolutely the catalyst, whether she wanted to acknowledge it or not. The real breaking point came on a rainy Tuesday night 6 weeks into the arrangement. Lena had gotten her period unexpectedly at work, the cramps hitting her so hard during a code blue that she'd nearly passed out right there in the cardiac wing. She'd made it through her shift through sheer force of will, then drove home in agony, white-knuckling the steering wheel. She made it to her room and headed straight for the bathroom, not wanting anyone to see her in pain. She hated showing weakness, hated the idea of being a burden. But the cramps were unbearable, waves of pain that made her nauseous and dizzy. She was sitting on her bathroom floor, crying from a combination of physical pain and emotional exhaustion from maintaining her composure constantly in this house, when she heard footsteps in her bedroom. Lena? Damian's voice was concerned, lacking any of its usual edge. Are you okay? I saw you come in from the garden where I was reading and you looked really pale, like you were about to collapse. I'm fine, she called back, trying desperately to steady her voice. Just tired. Long shift. You're crying. No, I'm not. Yes, you are. I can hear you. I'm coming in. Don't you dare. But he'd already opened the bathroom door. Lena looked up from the floor, mascara streaking down her face, clutching her stomach, her carefully maintained composure completely shattered. For a moment, Damian just stared, and then his expression transformed from curiosity to alarm. Are you hurt? Should I call someone? Dad? An ambulance? What's wrong? I'm fine, Lena said, mortified beyond belief. It's just cramps. Bad ones. They'll pass. Please just leave. Damian stood there awkwardly for a moment, clearly out of his depth, then suddenly disappeared. Lena assumed he'd left, grateful to be alone with her humiliation, but he returned a minute later with a heating pad, pain medication, and a glass of water. My mom used to get terrible cramps, he said quietly, kneeling beside her on the bathroom floor like it was the most natural thing in the world. Before she got sick. She taught me how to help. The mention of his mother made Lena look at him differently. He wasn't the arrogant playboy right now. He was just a man who'd lost his mother and remembered how to be kind. Lena took the pills, and Damian helped her stand and walk to her bed, supporting her weight without making her feel weak. He plugged in the heating pad and placed it carefully on her lower back, then pulled the blanket up around her with a gentleness that seemed at odds with everything she knew about him. "Thank you," Lena whispered. Damian sat on the edge of her bed, his earlier hostility completely gone. "I've been a complete asshole to you." "Yes, you have been." He laughed, surprised by her honesty. "You've never fought back." "Why?" "Most people would have told me off weeks ago." "Because I understood," Lena said simply. "You think I'm some opportunist taking advantage of your father. If I were in your position, if my parents suddenly married someone young without warning, I'd probably think the same thing. Your suspicion is logical. Your anger is justified. I'm a stranger who appeared in your life and became part of your family overnight. That's weird and wrong, and I don't blame you for hating it." "Are you taking advantage of him?" Lena met his eyes steadily. "The arrangement benefits both of us. Your father wanted stability in his life and someone who might influence you positively. I needed financial security for my brother. It's transactional, yes, but it's not predatory. And I genuinely care about your father, Damian. He's a good man who's been lonely for too long. I'm not going to hurt him." "You really don't want his money beyond what you agreed to?" "I want exactly what I signed up for. 6 months of pretending to be his wife, enough money to give my brother a chance at a better life than I had, and then I disappear. That's it. I'm not scheming for inheritance or positioning myself as the next Mrs. Landon permanently. When the contract ends, I'm gone." Damian studied her for a long time, and Lena could see him reassessing everything he'd believed about her. "You're not what I expected." "Neither are you," Lena admitted. "I thought you'd be more terrible, more consistently awful. Gimme time. I can be very terrible when properly motivated." But there was warmth in his voice now, the beginning of something that might eventually become friendship. When he finally left, Lena realized something dangerous had just happened. She was starting to like Damian Landon. And that was absolutely the last thing she needed in this already complicated situation. Over the following weeks, Damian's transformation accelerated in ways that surprised everyone, including himself. He started attending board meetings at Landon Dynamics, actually contributing ideas instead of showing up hungover and silent, treating the whole thing like an obligation to be endured. He began therapy twice a week with a psychiatrist who specialized in grief and trauma. He stopped appearing in tabloid headlines with scandalous photos. The business reporters started writing different stories. Landon heir steps up. Damian Landon's business acumen impresses board. The new face of Landon Dynamics. Maurice was thrilled, telling Lena daily how grateful he was. "You're performing miracles," he'd say. But Lena always insisted she wasn't doing anything beyond existing in the house. But the truth was far more complicated than Maurice realized. Damian and Lena were spending more time together. It started innocuously enough, watching movies in the home theater room, Damian explaining business concepts while Lena listened with genuine interest. Taking walks in the expansive garden, discussing books and music and all the normal things people discuss when they're getting to know each other, except they weren't normal people in a normal situation. They were a billionaire's son and his father's contract wife. Every conversation, every shared laugh, every moment of connection existed in this impossible ethical gray area that neither of them wanted to acknowledge. Damian started lingering in doorways when Lena was around. He'd lean against the frame, watching her water the indoor plants, or read on the sunroom couch, a strange expression on his face that Lena couldn't quite interpret. He asked about her day at the hospital, remembered small details she'd mentioned in passing, brought her coffee in the morning exactly how she liked it. with cream and 1 sugar. The staff noticed. The young master is different, Maria told Lena conspiratorially one afternoon while they prepared dinner together. Happier, more alive, more like he was before Miss Claire died. It's been years since I've seen him smile like that, like he actually means it. Maurice noticed too, but he interpreted it differently than the staff. He thought Lena's presence was giving Damian structure and purpose, helping him mature. He didn't see the way his son's eyes tracked Lena across rooms. He didn't notice the careful distance Damian maintained, like he was afraid of getting too close and revealing something he wanted to keep hidden. Lena noticed. And it terrified her, because she was noticing Damian too. The way his rare, genuine smiles transformed his entire face, softening the sharp edges and revealing the person he might have been if grief hadn't hardened him. The way he was brilliant when he talked about business strategy, his mind working through problems with dazzling speed. The way he played piano late at night when he thought everyone was asleep, pouring emotion into Chopin and Debussy that he couldn't express in words. The way he was kind to the staff once his defensive walls came down. The way he talked about his mother with love and pain intertwined. The way he was becoming the man Maurice had always hoped he'd be. She was noticing, and that was the worst thing that could happen in this situation. It all exploded on a Friday night 8 weeks into the arrangement when Maurice was away at a technology conference in San Francisco. Lena was in the library, curled up with a medical textbook. She'd started taking online courses toward becoming a physician assistant, using some of the money Maurice had given her as an advance, when Damian burst in. He'd clearly been drinking, though not heavily. Just enough to lower his inhibitions, to make him brave or foolish enough to say what he'd been holding back for weeks. "This is stupid," he announced without preamble, pacing in front of the fireplace like a caged animal. "This whole situation is stupid and impossible, and I can't do it anymore." Lena closed her book carefully, her heart already hammering because she knew where this was going. "What situation?" "You know what situation." Damian turned to face her, his expression raw and vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. "You being here, me being here, this constant pretending that there isn't something happening between us, this farce where we act like we're just friendly acquaintances when we both know it's more than that." "Damian, no. Let me finish. I need to say this before I lose my nerve." He ran his hands through his hair, frustrated and desperate. "I've spent weeks trying to ignore it, trying to convince myself it's just gratitude or admiration or whatever rational explanation I could find. But I can't anymore, Lena. I like you. More than like you. I think about you constantly. I look forward to seeing you every day. I find excuses to be wherever you are. And it's killing me because you're my father's wife. You're completely off limits in every way that matters." Lena stood up, her medical textbook falling forgotten to the floor. "We can't do this. We can't have this conversation. I know we can't. That's why this whole situation is impossible." Damian's voice was anguished. "You're the only person in years who's made me want to be better, who's made me think I could actually be the person everyone expects me to be instead of the disappointment I've been. But you're completely off limits, and I don't know how to stop feeling this way." "Yes, you do," Lena said, forcing strength into her voice even as her heart ached. "You stop. You acknowledge it and then you stop. Because your father trusted me, Damian. He gave me everything I needed to save my brother, to change my entire life. I'm not going to betray that trust. I won't." "I'm not asking you to," Damian said quietly, his voice dropping. "I'm just telling you the truth because keeping it inside was eating me alive. Because I needed you to know that someone sees you, Lena. Really sees you. Not as a contract or an arrangement or a solution to a problem. As yourself. as this incredible person who works herself to exhaustion to take care of everyone else, who treats everyone with kindness even when they don't deserve it, who reads medical textbooks for fun and makes terrible jokes, and has the most beautiful smile I've ever seen. Lena wanted to tell him she felt it too, that she lay awake at night in her massive bed thinking about him, that she'd started looking forward to their conversations more than anything else in her day. That somewhere along the way, he'd stopped being the hostile playboy and become someone she cared about deeply. That she was falling for him, despite every rational reason not to, despite the impossible ethics, despite knowing it could never work. But she couldn't say any of that. "You're being emotional," she said instead, proud that her voice stayed steady. "You've been through a lot of changes lately. You're in therapy, dealing with grief you've been avoiding for 10 years. You're confusing gratitude with something else. You're processing your feelings about your mother and your relationship with your father, and I'm here. So you're projecting onto me." "Don't do that," Damian said, his voice tight with frustration. "Don't dismiss what I'm feeling like I'm a child who doesn't know his own mind. I'm 34 years old, not some teenager with a crush. I've been with plenty of women, Lena. I know the difference between attraction and projection and whatever else you want to call it. This is real." "It doesn't matter what it is," Lena said, and now her voice was shaking. "Real or not, we're not doing this. We can't. I won't destroy your relationship with your father. I won't become the person who broke apart your family. End of discussion." She walked toward the library door, needing to escape before she broke down completely, before she admitted the truth and destroyed everything. But Damian's voice stopped her. "You feel it too. I know you do." Lena didn't turn around. "Good night, Damian." She made it to her room before she started crying. Because he was right. She did feel it. And that made everything so much worse. Because she wanted to go back. She wanted to tell him she felt the same way. She wanted to throw away all her principles and responsibilities and just be with him, consequences be damned. But she couldn't. She'd made a promise. And Lena Brooks kept her promises, no matter how much they cost her, no matter how much her heart was breaking. The story isn't over yet. In fact, the most emotional part is still coming. Stay with me because what happens next will break your heart and put it back together. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. After that night, everything changed. Damian threw himself into work with almost manic intensity. He was at the Landon Dynamics office before dawn and came home after dark. If he came home at all. He'd started sleeping at his office in the city some nights, claiming it was more efficient. When they did cross paths at the estate, he was polite but distant, professional, cordial in the way you'd be with a business associate, not someone you'd confessed feelings to just days earlier. It was exactly what Lena had wanted, what she'd demanded. And it absolutely broke her heart. But the transformation in him continued. Damian was becoming the man Maurice had always hoped he'd be. Responsible, focused, brilliant. The board of directors were impressed enough to start seriously discussing giving him more authority. The media coverage shifted from scandals to success stories about the heir stepping into his role. Maurice was thrilled, telling Lena almost daily how grateful he was for the change she'd brought to their lives. "You did this," he'd say. "You saved my son." Lena would force a smile and insist she hadn't done anything special. But inside, she was dying a little bit every day. She threw herself into work at the hospital and her online courses, trying to stay busy enough that she didn't have time to think about Damian. She spent more time with Evan, who was thriving in his program and full of plans for his future. She organized charity events for Maurice, attended social functions as the perfect billionaire's wife, played her role flawlessly. But she was miserable, and Maurice, despite his joy over Damian's progress, eventually noticed. "You're unhappy," he said one evening 10 weeks into the arrangement. They were in his study, reviewing the guest list for an upcoming gala. And before you say you're fine, please don't insult my intelligence. You've been crying. I can see it in your eyes, even when you're smiling. Lena's carefully maintained composure cracked. I'm just tired. The schedule is intense. Lena. Maurice's voice was gentle but firm. I'm not blind, and I'm not stupid. What's wrong? The concern in his voice, the genuine care, broke through her defenses. She'd been holding everything together for so long, maintaining her composure, fulfilling her contract obligations. But she was exhausted from pretending. I care about Damian, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. More than I should. I'm sorry. I never acted on it. I never crossed any boundaries. But I can't control my feelings. And I'm so sorry, Maurice. You trusted me, and I... Stop, Maurice said, raising his hand. Just stop, and listen to me. He walked to his desk and pulled out a folder, the same one he'd shown her the night he'd proposed this arrangement. I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear me out completely before you respond. Can you do that? Lena nodded, confused and terrified. I brought you into our lives to help Damian, Maurice said. That was my stated goal. But I've been watching both of you over these past weeks, and I've seen something I didn't expect. I've seen my son fall in love, really, genuinely fall in love for the first time since before his mother died. Not the superficial relationships he's had, not the one-night stands and party girls. Real, deep, transformative love. Maurice pulled out another envelope, this one sealed. And I've seen you fall in love too, even though you're trying so hard not to. Even though you're torturing yourself over it. Maurice, I can explain. You don't need to explain, Maurice said, because I'm releasing you from the contract, effective immediately. He handed her the envelope. Inside was a letter formally releasing her from all obligations, along with a check for the full agreed-upon $200,000, plus a substantial bonus. You're free, Maurice said, his voice heavy with emotion. I got what I needed. Damian is stable and thriving, becoming the man I always knew he could be. You've more than fulfilled your end of the arrangement. It's time for you to go live your own life, your real life. Not this contract we created. Lena stared at the check through blurring tears. Maurice, I don't understand. Why would you? Because I used you, Maurice interrupted, and now his voice was thick with regret. I brought you into our lives to fix my son, never truly considering that you might develop real feelings, that my son might fall for you. That I was creating an impossible situation that would hurt both of you. That was selfish and wrong, and I'm sorry. You gave me everything, Lena said, tears streaming down her face now. You saved my brother. You gave me opportunities I never could have had. I don't regret helping you. But you regret the cost, Maurice said quietly. I see it in your eyes every day, how much this is costing you. You love him, don't you? Lena couldn't lie anymore. She was too tired, too heartbroken. Yes, she whispered. I love him. God help me. I love him, and it's impossible and wrong, and I hate myself for it. It's not wrong, Maurice said firmly. My son is a good man who's finally found someone who makes him want to be his best self. And you're an extraordinary woman who deserves happiness. The only thing wrong here is the situation I created. So I'm fixing it. How? Lena asked desperately. How does me leaving fix anything? Because when you leave, you won't be my wife anymore. We'll divorce quietly, cite irreconcilable differences like the contract always specified. And then, you and Damian can choose each other freely, without the shadow of betrayal or impropriety hanging over everything. You can start fresh, without contracts or arrangements or ethical complications. What if he doesn't want that? Lena's voice was small, vulnerable. What if he's moved on? Maurice smiled sadly. My son has been miserable for weeks. He's throwing himself into work because it's the only thing that keeps him from thinking about you. He asked me yesterday if you seemed happy, if you ever mentioned him. He's as much in love with you as you are with him. Lena was full-on sobbing now, overwhelmed by everything. You're a good man, Maurice. One of the best I've ever known. I'm a flawed man who made mistakes, Maurice corrected, but I'm trying to fix them now. Go, Lena. Leave here, establish your own life, pursue your dreams. And when the divorce is final in a few months, if you and Damian still feel the same way, you can choose each other without guilt. Lena packed that night, moving quietly through her wing of the mansion, folding the life she'd lived for 10 weeks into suitcases. She'd leave at dawn, before anyone could see her, before she had to say goodbye to Damian and break down completely. She'd written him a letter, trying to explain without explaining, telling him to keep being the amazing person he was becoming. She left it on his desk in the study, but as she was loading her final suitcase into her Honda at 6 a.m, the sun just beginning to light the harbor, she heard footsteps behind her. You're leaving. Damian's voice was flat, emotionless, carefully controlled. Lena turned to face him. He was in rumpled clothes, like he'd slept in them, and his hair was a mess. His eyes were red-rimmed, and she realized with a jolt that he'd been crying. The contract is fulfilled, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Your father released me. It's time for me to go. Just like that. No goodbye. Just a letter. Goodbyes are too hard. Lena's voice cracked. I can't do goodbyes, Damian. I'll fall apart. So you're running away. His voice was still flat, but she could hear the pain underneath. I'm setting us both free, Lena said desperately. Your father released me from the contract. You don't need me here anymore. You're doing amazing, Damian. You don't need a fake stepmother watching over you, complicating your life. What if I don't want you as a stepmother? Damian said quietly, taking a step closer. Lena's breath caught. Damian, don't. What if I want you as something else entirely? Something real? He moved closer, and Lena could see the raw vulnerability in his eyes, the hope and fear mixed together. Stay. Not because of my father or money or contracts. Stay because you want to. Because you feel this thing between us, too. I can't, Lena whispered, even though every cell in her body was screaming at her to stay. The ethics, the situation, your father. My father knows, Damian interrupted. He told me last night about releasing you from the contract, about how he sees how we feel about each other. He gave me his blessing, Lena. He wants us to be happy. That doesn't fix the fact that I was married to your father. That people will talk, will judge. Let them talk, Damian said fiercely. Let them judge. I don't care what anyone thinks anymore. I've spent my entire life caring what people thought, living up to or rebelling against expectations. But you taught me something these past weeks. You taught me that the only thing that matters is choosing to be better. Choosing to be authentic, choosing to fight for what's real. He took her hands in his, and Lena felt the warmth of his touch radiating through her entire body. I'm not the playboy I was when you met me. I'm not that reckless, selfish person who measured his worth in tabloid headlines. I've spent months becoming someone worthy of you. Please don't leave now, right when I finally am. I was never trying to change you, Lena said, tears streaming down her face. I know. That's why it worked. Damian smiled through his own tears. You just existed. Just were yourself. And that was enough to make me want to be better. You make me want to be the man I see reflected in your eyes, the person my mother hoped I'd become. You're already that man, Lena said. You always were, Damian. You were just hurting and lost and grieving. You just needed time and space to remember who you really are. Then help me keep remembering, Damian said urgently. Stay with me. Not as some contractual obligation. Not as my father's wife. As yourself, Lena Brooks. As the woman I'm completely, desperately, hopelessly in love with. Lena's resolve, her careful control, finally crumbled completely. She'd been strong for so long, responsible for so long, sacrificing her own happiness for so long. Maybe, just maybe, she deserved to choose something for herself. To choose love, even if it was complicated and messy and unconventional. I love you too, she whispered. God, I love you so much it terrifies me. Damian pulled her into his arms, and they stood there in the early morning light, holding each other like they were the only two people in the world who mattered. Like everything they'd been through had been worth it to arrive at this moment. We'll wait, Damian said into her hair, until the divorce is final, until everything is proper and clean. But I'm not letting you go, Lena. Not now. Not ever. Promise? Lena asked, her voice muffled against his chest. I promise, Damian said. No more contracts. No more conditions. Just us, figuring this out together. 1 year later, the garden at Landon Ridge was decorated with simple white flowers and fairy lights strung between the trees, creating a magical atmosphere as evening fell. No massive guest list, no press, no spectacle. Just close friends, family, and the people who mattered most. Lena wore a simple white dress that she'd chosen herself. No designer label needed. Evan walked her down the aisle, tall and confident now, about to graduate with honors and already fielding job offers from top engineering firms. You deserve this, he whispered, squeezing her hand. You deserve every bit of happiness in the world. Damian stood at the altar looking at her like she was every good thing that had ever happened to him, like she was sunrise after the longest night. Maurice stood beside him as best man, his eyes suspiciously wet. His health improved dramatically over the past year. No contracts this time, Damian said when it was time for vows. No conditions, no time limits, no pretending. Just you and me and the rest of our lives. I promise to love you authentically, to choose you every single day, to never stop working to be worthy of your love. Just us, Lena agreed, smiling through happy tears. I promise to see you, really see you, for exactly who you are, to support your growth, to challenge you when you need it, to love you unconditionally, forever. They married at sunset, the sky painted in shades of pink and gold over the harbor. During the reception, Maurice gave a toast that left everyone in tears. She didn't just save my son, he said, his voice thick with emotion. She saved our entire family. She came into our lives through the most unconventional arrangement imaginable, and she taught us how to be human again, how to love without conditions or contracts, how to be vulnerable and strong at the same time. I brought her here to fix a problem, but she did something much more important. She taught us how to be a family again, how to choose love over fear. And I am so proud to officially welcome her to our family, this time without paperwork or legal obligations. Just love. As the evening wound down, Lena and Damian slipped away to the garden, walking hand in hand to the same rose garden where she'd married Morris just over a year ago, in that surreal ceremony that had started everything. Do you ever regret it? Damian asked quietly, pulling her close. The contract? Everything that came after? The impossible situation? Lena thought about it honestly. The fear, the uncertainty, the heartbreak. The impossible ethics and the complicated emotions. The weeks of loving him in secret, thinking it could never work. No, she said honestly. Every difficult moment led me here. To you. To this life. to this family. I wouldn't change a single thing, because changing any of it might mean we never found each other. Damian pulled her close, swaying with her to music only they could hear, the estate lights glowing softly behind them. The same lights that had intimidated her a year ago now felt like home. "Thank you," Damian whispered against her hair. "For what?" "For not giving up on me, for seeing who I could be when I couldn't see it myself, for staying even when leaving would have been easier." Lena pulled back to look at him, this man who'd transformed from hostile stranger to the love of her life, who'd grown from a lost boy into an extraordinary man. "Thank you for becoming someone worth staying for," she said. "Thank you for choosing to change, for doing the hard work, for letting me see your heart." They kissed as the stars emerged overhead, two people who'd found each other in the most unlikely circumstances and built something real and lasting from a foundation of pretend. Sometimes, Lena thought as she rested her head against Damian's chest and listened to his heartbeat, the best love stories start with impossible situations. Sometimes you have to lose yourself completely to find where you really belong. And sometimes, just sometimes, a desperate contract with a billionaire leads to the greatest love of your life and teaches you that the heart doesn't care about propriety or conventional paths. Love finds a way, even through the most complicated circumstances. Especially through the most complicated circumstances. Because those complications force you to be honest about what really matters. And what really matters is choosing each other, every single day, without conditions or contracts. Just love. Pure, simple, transformative love. If you loved Lena and Damian's emotional journey, please hit that like button and subscribe for more romance stories that will make you believe in love again. Drop a comment telling me what you thought. Which moment made you cry? Which scene was your favorite? Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.